Chemical control regulations in China are like bamboo, abundant, growing fast and not always easy to digest. And just like a panda needs to chew through a lot of bamboo, the chemical industry needs to navigate and comply with a growing forest of regulations. So I'm happy to explore these developments with Helen Huangfu from Lubrizol and Fay Li from Merck. Let's start broad. What are the key trends you're seeing in China's chemical regulatory landscape, and how should companies proactively prepare for what is coming?
I think that it is a very clear trend that the China authorities start to strengthen the environmental protection, hazardous chemical management, and also new pollutants. And it is become a very clear trend. Now the regulatory scheme become more stringent and also more integrated module, higher legal authority, more enforcement, more stringent supervision. So I think that for the companies who actually would like to do well in this environment, we need to manage the compliance as a business strategy, integrate different functions within the organization to manage the overall business compliance, and also make sure that we have very solid and compliance data to manage this challenge. Yeah, I think that's primarily my thoughts.
Yeah, for me, I fully agree with all the perspectives mentioned by Helen, because as you know, in recent years, the China chemical regulations are increasingly stringent and also constantly evolving with a very clear focus on the digitalization, sustainability, as well as the full life cycle management of the chemicals. So to navigate the complexities requires a keen understanding of the overall regulatory landscape and also a focus on the innovation.
We are clearly seeing an evolution of the regulatory ecosystem. From Order 17 back in 2003, the first step towards managing new chemicals, to today's Decree 64, which turns regulation into law and raises enforcement to a whole new level. If we zoom in on this new hazardous chemical safety law, what is then the biggest change companies should understand straight away?
From my perspective, actually, I think the biggest change is that currently the hazardous chemical safety requirement is becoming one part of the national safety strategy, which means any violations will be regarded as a damage to the overall country interest. And most importantly, the regulations, also the law and regulations also further strengthens the accountability of companies substantially, and also, pose the penalties for both enterprises as well as the individuals.
Does that mean it's mainly about tighter control, or is it more about clear responsibilities across the value chain?
I think for both, on one side, the regulatory requirements and inspection, the inspection requirements are further strengthened. And on the other hand, both the companies as well as the individuals should take, higher responsibilities for the hazardous chemical management in future.
Okay. Helen, does this mean a shift in compliance from a document exercise to a real operational and management issue then?
Yes, I think that you exactly make the points. And I think that when we look at the hazardous chemical regulation in China, the recently announced hazardous chemical safety law, you can see actually it is moving from the current module of compliance or reactive compliance to a more integrated risk management scheme. So that means it requires life cycle governance through all the supply chain, from product is generated to product is recycled back. And also another typical new trend of this regulation is the digitalization of the data required for both authorities and also required for the chemical industries. I think Kay may talking about the QR code, etc. And actually, authority is also planning to develop an electronic supervision platform. That means the authority will leverage the digitalization to strengthen their supervision, enforcement, and also transparencies. So I think that to prepare for that, it is critical for the company to make sure that they have very solid, internal management processes covering all different stages of products to manage these new requirements.
Okay, thank you. Helen already mentions this, and a lot of management requirements tied to hazardous chemicals, including the traceability and QR code system. Fay, we went together to the Shanghai municipality a few years ago. How far is China now in moving towards digital traceability in practice?
Actually, as you know, the pilot program was started since 2021, and after years, the regulatory landscape already broadly formed two major directions. First one is the Safety Information Code at national level, a static code, so-called NRCC code. Another one is Shanghai Traceability Code policy, and for the first NRCC code, currently it is being promoted nationwide through a national standard revision, the JB 15258, and after the JB is officially released, then the QR code, the safety information code, will become a mandatory element for the JHS labeling. And currently, the JB is under authority expert review stage and to be finalized within this year. And in terms of the Shanghai Traceability Code policy, as far as we know that the Shanghai authority is also aiming to further strengthen the traceability code policy in near future, right after the national JB is officially published.
Okay, and does it mean it's still evolving, or is it already becoming business as usual for companies on the ground?
It is still under, under the involvement stage, I would say, but it will be finalized within the near future.
And for the companies, for dealing with it, I mean, the regulations are evolving, but yes, you as a company, are you implementing it?
Yeah, for Merck, actually, we already started the system development since 2 years ago, because it's really a complex, project. From project perspective, it is not purely an IT project or EHS project. It's a cross-functional, cross-enterprise boundary, as well as system transformation system. The system transformation is really a great challenge to most of the companies due to the manpower, the cost, the supply chain lead time. So even though the impact varies from the type and size of the companies, but many of the companies need to pay more attention and also to implement a significant and complex, the transformation, the adjustment based on the current process and system. So per my understanding, many of the companies already started this journey.
And Lubrizol also started this journey? I saw you nodding.
Yes, I think that, as you know, actually the government also take a very precautious way in considering this digitalization or QR approach applied for hazardous chemical management in China. So over the time, as Fay has been shared, there are piloting project running in different provinces, and companies either use their business process or their business digital system to manage those provision pilot QR requirements. Lubrizol definitely is participating.
So far we've talked about managing hazardous chemicals, but Order 12, China REACH, determines whether a substance can enter the market. Fay, do companies still underestimate the complexity of new chemical substance notification schemes?
I should say the answer is yes or no, because it depends on the size and type of the company's Actually, per our understanding and our information, for middle and small size companies, they are easily to underestimate the new chemical registration requirements in China. But starting from last year, both the environmental and ecological code, as well as the to be revised Order number 12 raised the bar for the future compliance requirement of new chemical registrations in China. Those companies may lose the opportunities to win or even lose the opportunities to survive in China if they do not make any adjustment immediately.
Okay, so there are some deadlines and strategies to go ahead with internally to make that ready for this new approach.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so, because as you know, the effective date of the code is 15th August. Yeah. As well as the revised order number 12 will be released and also enter into effect at that date.
Helen, with these changes, how big is the issue of confidential business information now during notification?
Here is my understanding. Overall speaking, I think that from my experience, the authorities in China understand the importance of CBI protection and also CBI values. So from the notification perspective, the authority actually have quite a sound mechanism in place to protect the CBI information for the doses submitted to them. However, we also see a trend or strengthened trend, more and more robust data or justification are required for, get the substance, under the CBI protection, which definitely pose some challenges because I think the company always try to disclose as less sensitive information as possible. But overall, from the CBI protection notification perspective, I think overall for China, the situation is good. Currently, we are under the new chemical revision, as you know. From the draft for comment, we see actually the previous polymer exemption may change as the polymer registration. What does that mean? For polymers that will receive the registration certificate in the future, it will require public disclosure before final approval will be released. So I think I do have some concern on CBI information disclosure because I think according to current China authorities process, all the substances receive certification require public disclosure, including its chemical name, its usage, its tonnage, before ultimately the substance would be able to be approved and the certificate will be issued. For polymers, the structure, the monomer information would be very difficult to hide from this public, disclosure for public comments stage. So I think I do have some concern on CBI on that part, and also this would be one of the areas we hope that we would be able to have more dialogue with the authority.
So would they require more disclosure of confidential information than under Korea's REACH polymer registrations, or what is currently the expectation there?
I think when I talk about this, we are talking about the China polymer.
I know,
China notification.
But my question is, if you for K-REACH, you also have to provide information. Is China now asking more than K-REACH, or is it similar as K-REACH demands?
I think that the key concern is the authority actually will share some of the information like general chemical name or exact chemical name, the chemical uses, and also the volume of chemicals, in the public adaptation period. And especially for polymers, I think that even the generic chemical names disclose a lot of sensitive information. So I think this is currently one of the key concerns I have or industrial actually has.
Another topic gaining a lot of visibility is emerging pollutant management. What exactly is changing here and why should companies like Merck and Lubrizol pay attention?
Yeah, I think this is a significant new trend because the China government, moved from a stage, pollutant control or pollutant management to a pre-assessment and also pre-control or early risk control for those new pollutants. And I think this is also very critical for company because those substances actually the government will treat it as potential high pollution for the society, and they may apply risk assessment, screening, or even restriction or prohibition for those substances after their risk assessment conducted. So for companies, actually, we need to monitor this process very closely to understand, okay, what would be potential impact on our current manufacture or supply chain? Are there any substances we see significant, new hazards or emerging hazards or polluts that we may need to phase out? So it will have impact on our business activities, our product profiles, and also our business strategies. So I think this is definitely very critical. For me, this is a little bit similar like EU SVHC concept. That means for some of the substances, once, of course, in China, it's government-led process, risk management and also risk assessment process. However, once the substance is identified as restriction or prohibition, then I think that it is critical for company to know the process and also prepare in advance.
A major development is the new Ecological and Environmental Code. From an industry perspective, why is this such a significant milestone, Fay?
Actually, I think the answer is very simple and straightforward because the code further integrates a series of existing rules and regulations together and into a very unified and standardized regulatory framework. And also for industry, this means a much clearer and stricter, regulatory code in future, especially for the hardest chemical registrations, the new pollutant controls, as well as very, tougher penalties in future. So this is of vital importance.
Okay, and does this code mainly consolidate existing rules, or does it signal a real shift in how China wants to govern chemical and environmental risk?
For both, actually, as I mentioned, it further consolidates all the existing regulations together, and on the other hand, it also further strengthens and also emphasize, the inspection requirement in China, covering the registration permit, as well as the disposal, the phase-out process, and also the, disclosure requirement as well.
Okay, and does this code inspire companies to a more integrated life cycle-based approach?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, this is a very high-level regulation. Actually, it is kind of law in China, and it is critical for company to understand what does that mean. When we look at this code, environmental code, actually it adopt a systematic approach managing the environmental related hazards or its releasing, and from the life cycle perspective. So to cope with these new requirements, company definitely also need to look into the product development, product supply, product uses, etc. in a life cycle and also more sustainability approach.
Okay, and do you expect this code to create a more connected approach between pollution control, chemicals management and sustainability?
Yes. Yeah, if we look at the environmental code, actually it covers new chemical, new pollutants, and also various existing environmental related law and also regulations. And I think that it also set up a very clear tone that the management of this environmental protection would be the highest requirement from the authority with stringent and also more integrated management. So I think that it will trigger the company also adopt a similar approach to ensure good compliance.
Okay. You want to add something there?
Fully agree. Actually.
You fully agree.
Because it suggests, a more connected regulatory management approach in future, not only from the government perspective, but for the companies as well.
Okay. Looking beyond pure compliance, how does China's regulatory direction fit into its broader roadmap toward a circular and sustainable economy?
It's a big topic. Actually, product compliance is the bottom line, and as well as the sustainability, also the circular, the economy should be the core directions for future China. So in recent years, we already noticed that the government is guiding the industry away from the high emission, high risk operational model to a high quality development approach. So this is the future trend. Yeah.
Okay, and if companies want to stay competitive in China, how important is it then to connect regulatory compliance with a sustainability strategy?
As just mentioned, sustainability is for future, and the product compliance is the foundation of this future. So integrating the product compliance mindset into the company's sustainability strategies will help the company to adapt to the regulatory change very smoothly, and also to ensure their competitiveness, and finally they can keep a very solid market position in a long run.
Okay, and those companies that do that, they have a competitive advantage in the market?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, the Chinese consumers and supply chains, they are demanding this?
Yeah, I think so. And actually from our experience, customer in the China market are also looking for green and safer product. So I think the new scheme definitely encourages this direction, and the company who actually would be able to have this element into their business overall strategy definitely can lead to competitive advantages.
How do these developments affect companies' strategies and investment decisions, Fay?
In short term, actually meeting those additional requirements need, further invest and input for product compliance, which means the compliance cost is risen and risen. But going forward, this capability will become the core business, the advantage and also the competitiveness for company. Whether a company can quickly understand the regulatory change and also, adjust their system and process accordingly will, largely and directly affect their market response speed in future.
Okay, and what are the biggest challenges and where are the opportunities for companies then?
The biggest challenges is, as I just said, the current overall regulatory framework is more and more stringent and constantly changing all the time. So for companies, they need to keep a close eye and monitor the regulatory change all the time. And on the other hand, the regulatory requirement is moving from a very isolated regulatory requirement to a full life cycle management approach. So companies need to be active for the dialogue with the authorities as well. And another point is that QR code is the future trend. Also, the companies need to consider how to strike a balance between the data transparency as well as the data security.
Final question. Should companies be as flexible as bamboo to keep up with all the regulatory and sustainability developments in China?
Yes. First, I would say I really like your metaphor of bamboo. And I think that, if we look at the regulatory environment in China, I think that the flexibility bamboo demonstrated is very important and also very critical. However, I would say not only the flexibility, agility, but actually the bamboo also needs to be very well rooted, because the flexibility actually cannot be reached if we do not have solid compliance data, solid compliance management system, things like that. So I think that the advice for the company is we need to be flexible and also agile.
Fully agree, and I would add maybe only one thing is that for companies facing with the very comprehensive and also systematic regulatory framework, it is not enough to only focus on the execution, but also on the upfront judgment, the system planning, as well as the cross-function collaboration within the company. Long story in short, implementation is important, but the decision making at the very early stage is much more important.
Helen and Fay, thank you for this clear and nuanced overview. From hazardous chemicals and emergent pollutant control to traceability and circularity, China's regulatory landscape is evolving fast and growing like bamboo. One thing is certain, regulations are not black and white.